Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. It's titled What to Expect When You're Expecting a Tsunami. So we are going to present to you information on what a tsunami is, what the hazards are and risks are here in Washington State, and how to prepare yourself so you can survive a tsunami. All right, so some housekeeping. Questions and comments can be submitted in the Q&A box in the upper right-hand corner. Also, captions are available by clicking the settings gear icon in the lower right-hand corner. And this webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded to youtube.com/user/emdprepare as soon as we can get it up there. So for our presenters today, I'm Maximilian Dixon. I'm the Hazards and Outreach Program Supervisor here at Washington State Emergency Management Division, Washington EMD. We also have Alex Dolce-Mascolo, who is a tsunami geoscientist with the Washington Geological Survey. We have Jacob Whitcraft, who is a tsunami program coordinator here at Washington EMD. And we have Alyssa Tapero, who is also a tsunami program coordinator here at Washington EMD. So tsunami hazards in Washington State. All right, so in Washington State, we have the second highest earthquake risk in the country. We have a very high risk from tsunamis, from both local and distant source tsunamis, 5 active volcanoes, and landslides. So there's a lot of risk here in Washington State. Cascadia Subduction Zone. So this is the big one. I'm sure everyone has heard of the Cascadia Subduction Zone. It's roughly 700 miles long from northern Vancouver Island all the way down to northern California. It ruptures roughly every 300 to 600 years. The last time we had a big earthquake on the Cascadia Subduction Zone fault was about 320 years ago. There's a 10 to 20% chance within the next 50 years that there will be a magnitude 8 to 9 plus event on the Cascadia Subduction Zone. When it does happen, it could shake. The shaking could last up to 3 to 6 minutes, which will be a very long time. Also, as a reference, the Nisqually earthquake from 2001, that lasted for about 45 seconds. So this will seem like forever. The shaking intensity. Will be the greatest along the outer coast, which is closest to the subduction zone, and it will be less intense the further you go inland. Also very important is that within about 15 to 20 minutes after the earthquake starts, the first tsunami wave will hit the outer coast within 15 to 20 minutes. Also, there will be a lot of large aftershocks, and there could be aftershocks for years after this event. So a little bit about the distant versus local tsunamis. So I want to clarify this a little bit so everyone's understands what the differences are. So for a distant source tsunami, this means that there was an earthquake far away from Washington State. You will not feel the shaking. The first wave from that's generated from that event, the first tsunami wave, will hit Washington coastline more than 3 hours after the earth started shaking. You will have more warning time, obviously, for a distant event because it'll take longer for the first wave to get here. There will be less inundation, there will be less intense currents, and therefore less severe impacts from a distant event. Now, I mean, as an example, Alaska is probably our most likely scenario. For a local source tsunami, you will feel the shaking. So this could be the Cascadia Subduction Zone, the Seattle Fault, could be a landslide. You'll feel the shaking, but also for the definition of a local source event, essentially that means the wave will arrive within less than 3 hours after the shaking starts. The earthquake again is the primary warning for the ground shaking. There will be higher inundation, faster, more severe currents, and thus higher, more significant impacts. So for a local source tsunami, again, the shaking is your warning. The first wave will arrive within seconds to minutes. So for a Seattle fault earthquake, it could generate a tsunami. It hits the city of Seattle within seconds to minutes. Now make sure that when you feel the shaking, you want to first drop cover and hold on and protect yourself during the shaking so that you don't break your leg, hit your head, injure yourself, so that as soon as it's safe, you can get to high ground as quickly as possible and stay there until it's safe to come back to the shore. Now, it's important to understand the natural tsunami warning signs. So again, if you feel the shaking, that's the first #1 natural warning sign. Again, drop cover and hold on, protect yourself, get to high ground or inland as soon as possible. Now, if you see a sudden rise or fall of the ocean, i.e. a wall of water coming towards you, or the ocean or water rapidly recedes and you're seeing fish flopping on the ground, don't go get the fish, don't go run out there, go the opposite direction, go to high ground immediately because there could be a tsunami on the way. Also, if you hear a loud roaring sound coming from the ocean or the water, such as sounds like a jet plane or a train or something very unusual, that could be another indicator that the tsunami is on the way. So please make sure if you experience any of these, grab your go bag, head to high ground as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. So for a distant source tsunami, again, Alaska event is our most likely event. The first tsunami wave would arrive within about a little less than 4 hours here on Washington coast. Now, if you can see this graph here, the higher the red bar is, that means that an earthquake at that particular location would generate, that potentially that high of a tsunami wave that would hit Washington coastline. So you can see here, Alaska has the highest red bars. So those are most likely event and potentially the most damaging for a distant source event. And the shaking will not be your warning. You're not going to feel ground shaking for a distant source event because the earthquake is very far away. But you will get alerted through official alerts, through emergency alert system, wireless emergency alert, tsunami sirens, etc. That is how you will know that a tsunami is on the way. Now let's go over the tsunami alerts real quick. So there are 4. There's the information statement, which means, hey, there was a big earthquake underneath the Pacific Ocean, near the Pacific Ocean. It's being monitored. There's no expected tsunami or danger. You don't need to do anything. Now, occasionally there will be a tsunami information statement that says, hey, we're still monitoring the situation. But again, you don't need to take any action. For a watch, that means that a large enough event has happened where there is a tsunami. That's possible, right? There's a possible tsunami, but they don't have enough information yet to verify that a tsunami is on the way. So they're still, looking at the dart gauges, tide gauges, dart buoys, etc., to figure out if a tsunami is on the way or not. And then so that means that stay tuned. Go to tsunami.gov. Pay attention to NOAA the radio. Get your go bag ready. Get ready to evacuate if you need to high ground. Now the next one is an advisory. So this means that there is an actual tsunami on the way. And that you need to get away from the water, away from the shore, and because there is a 1 to 3 foot tsunami wave on the way. For a warning, this means you need to immediately get to high ground. This is the most dangerous situation. You've got a tsunami that's on the way that has wave heights higher than 3 feet. And expected powerful currents. It's a very dangerous situation. So for a tsunami warning, you definitely need to get to high ground immediately. All right, tsunami alert dissemination. So who disseminates these, right? So essentially you've got 2 different warning centers that I'll go into here in a second. But essentially the tsunami alerts, they occur for any type of tsunami event. So that's why we have the different 4 tsunami alert levels. But they're most important, these different types of tsunami alerts are most important during a distant source event because you will not feel the shaking. And so let me go over here the different ways that you can receive alerts and how you formed. So first, tsunami warning centers, you have 2. So you've got the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center that's located in Honolulu, Hawaii. So they issue alerts for 26 different countries, Hawaii, a bunch of different islands, Caribbean. So they issue alerts for folks located in those areas. But they do not issue alerts for Washington State. For Washington State, you need to pay attention to alerts from the National Tsunami Warning Center. It's located in Palmer, Alaska. And so they issue tsunami alerts for Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California. So some examples, these are alerts that were issued during the October 19th, 2020 event. So on the left here, you've got NTWC message that was issued at 3:41 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So essentially it says here, tsunami warning in effect for South Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula. And then down below in the box there, for other US and Canadian Pacific coast in North America, there is no tsunami threat. Now, in the message itself, there's no box highlighting this, but pay attention to the National Tsunami Warning Center messages if you're in Washington State or one of the areas that they issue alerts for. Now, for the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, they also will issue alerts during a tsunami event. But again, these are not for California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, Alaska, etc. For folks in those locations, pay attention to the NTWC messages. And I know it can be confusing sometimes, so please familiarize yourself with these types of messages and which one to pay attention to. So alert dissemination. So there's a number of different ways that alerts are sent out. You can receive them through the Emergency Alert System, EAS. So this was originally designed for the president to address the nation in times of disaster, life-threatening weather events, natural hazards such as a tsunami, Amber Alerts. I'm sure you've read or heard those as well. We also have the NOAA weather radios. And by the way, EAS is through radio, through TV, through a number of different normal news channels. Also, the NOAA weather radio, these broadcast warning information for all types of hazards over the NOAA weather radio channels. You have to have special NOAA weather radios, which I highly recommend you go get and make sure that you can program for your area because they can be life-saving. Also, wireless emergency alerts. So these are alerts that are sent out to our cell phones. It will only be sent out for a tsunami alert, that is, will only be sent out if a tsunami warning is issued. Not any of the other alert types, just the warning. And you'll only receive one message. And there's a lot of assumptions here that your cell phone is able to receive wireless emergency alerts, that it's not turned off, that you're not on roaming. So there's a possibility that you won't receive it due to other conditions. That's why it's good to be able to make sure that you have multiple ways of receiving tsunami alerts. We also have our all hazard alert broadcast tsunami sirens that we've installed along the coast here in Washington State. So these are outdoor tsunami sirens. They're intended to warn people on or near the beach that are outside, not in your home, but outside. There also is a limited range. So you can hear it within about 1 mile radius of the siren if the weather is good and there's no heavy wind or whatnot. We currently have 95 sirens installed. We're going to be installing a whole bunch more to fill all of the gaps, the remaining gaps in the coastal areas in Washington State. So we should be complete by summertime next year. Also, for activating the sirens, that's done through the Alert and Warning Center here located in the State Emergency Operations Center. So these are duty officers that are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So if the tsunami warning is issued, we will hit the sirens. We also, for these sirens, we do monthly tests, first Monday of every month. We play the Westminster chimes and a test message just to make sure the sirens are working. And also during a tsunami warning itself, an event, you will hear the wailing tone followed by verbal instructions to get to high ground in English and Spanish. And also you will hear the wailing tone and a test message during the Great Shakeout every year. We also test that, and that's the third Thursday of every October. Great place to get information is tsunami.gov. Now, if there's been an advisory or a warning that's been issued, please get to high ground immediately. Do not go to tsunami.gov. Do not check anything. Get to high ground, right? As fast as you can. Protect yourself. So tsunami.gov is great because it gives you a bunch of information on, what was the earthquake, what's going on, all the different alerts that have been sent out. Make sure you're looking for the messages and alerts that are for Alaska, BC, US West Coast. And there's a bunch of great information on there. Now, a couple things, you will not find information for the intercoast for a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake or a distant source event for the Salish Sea or Puget Sound. You will not find it on there yet. They're still working on that, making sure that can happen. Also, there's a history of crashing, although they've made some improvements and added some servers, so that can happen. Now, for alerting for the intercoast, You can see here on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got a red polygon for the inner coast alerting area, and you've got the green polygon for the outer coast. So for the red polygon areas, the National Weather Service, National Warning Center, does not have the ability to forecast for tsunamis or do alerting for that area for a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake or distant tsunami events. What this means is that alerting for those areas will not come out through No Weather Radio, EAS, be listed on tsunami.gov, for wave arrival times or any type of information. Now they're working on fixing this gap, but in the meantime, Washington Emergency Management Division, if once we are given the information from the National Warning Center that, hey, there is a tsunami warning for this intercoast area, again, for the red polygon area, then we will issue a wireless emergency alert, essentially a tsunami warning through WIA for that area, warning folks. So that'll be the only alert that will come out for that area until that gap gets fixed. And that's how you get alerted for tsunamis.
Hello everyone, I am Alex Veltimascolo with the Washington Geological Survey, and today I will be talking about tsunami impacts in our state, as well as highlight some of our current and upcoming products. But first, I would like to bring attention to a couple of recent devastating tsunami events that occurred around the world, most notably the 2011 event in Japan and the 2004 event in Sumatra, Indonesia. These are two of the most deadliest and costliest natural disasters in world history. For example, in Japan, 20,000 people were dead or missing, and the World Bank estimated the economic cost of this event could reach $235 billion. The event in Sumatra also killed more than 230,000 people. These two events have shaped the way we think about tsunami hazards and their impacts. Understanding the hazard allows us to better prepare our people and infrastructure. So tsunamis occur when large quantities of water get displaced, such as by an earthquake, a landslide, or volcanic eruption. Other processes, such as atmospheric disturbances or meteorite impacts, can also create a tsunami, but these are much more rare. Landslides and earthquake-generated tsunamis are the most common threat that our state faces today. So tsunamis are not your traditional wave. They travel very fast across the open ocean and involve multiple waves. The first wave is not always the largest either. These waves are huge in width, length, and depth, and wave activity can last for days. These are powerful, damaging currents full of debris and occur unexpectedly. Warning time may vary. A tsunami won't impact every part of the coast in the same way either. The shape of the seafloor and orientation of bays or coastlines can cause waves to grow before they reach land. Additionally, land features and vegetation onshore can also affect wave height and flooding extent of the tsunami. And then, in addition to the CSZ, there are also many local crustal faults that cross Washington's inner waterways and can produce tsunamis. One major concern is the Seattle Fault in the Puget Sound, shown here. And if we zoom into the southern portion of Bainbridge Island, as this white box is showing on the screen, and look at the LiDAR data, we can distinctly see this fault trace crossing Bainbridge Island. There has been as many as 3 or possibly 4 earthquakes here between 2,500 to 1,000 years ago. The most recent was about 1,000 years ago and triggered a tsunami in the Puget Sound. We think this was a magnitude 7 to 7.5 size event. So tsunami deposits and other geologic clues provide valuable information in learning about past tsunami history. This is a map showing locations that have a preserved tsunami deposit. One of the best sites in Washington is at Discovery Bay near Port Townsend. And if you look at the location map on the upper right hand of the screen, that red symbol is showing the location of Port Townsend in Discovery Bay. So here, there are distinct gray sand layers preserved in tidal marsh stratigraphy from previously unreported tsunami events. Researchers are then able to determine when these tsunamis occurred by radiocarbon dating the organic material above and below each sand layer. This helps provide an average estimate for how frequent these earthquakes and tsunami events occur over time, and the extent of tsunami deposits, among other geologic lines of evidence, also help validate the accuracy of tsunami modeling. So tsunami modeling is a useful tool to estimate wave arrival times, tsunami wave amplitude, inundation depth, tsunami extent, the duration of wave activity, as well as current speeds. And in Washington, we model tsunamis using the L1 scenario. Previous modeling work developed multiple scenarios that were equated to t-shirt sizes, and our state decided that the large scenario, or L1, shown on the left of the screen here, is a conservative choice that produces a tsunami as big as or bigger than 95% of the other modeling. So modeling this scenario also allows us to estimate land level changes after the earthquake. In this middle figure, it shows continental land building up stress and uplifting prior to an earthquake event, but then releases stress and subsides immediately following the earthquake. It is this release of stress that causes land level change offshore that generates the tsunami. And our tsunami models are able to calculate the energy of this tsunami and estimate the amount of water that is expected to travel inland. However, we make many assumptions in our tsunami models that are important to note before I begin sharing some of our simulation videos. Firstly, we use a very simple earthquake model, and the next earthquake will likely be much more complex. The wave heights we present are also referenced to mean high water or the high tide tidal datum, and depending on the actual tides, waves could be bigger or smaller. Our modeling is also completed on bare earth topography, so there is no wave interaction between buildings or vegetation. And lastly, these models do not account for the possibility of seismically induced landslides, which could enhance local inundation. So now I will show our local statewide simulation video using the L1 magnitude 9 scenario, and we're going to be focusing on wave amplitude over water. And we have our wave peaks being shown in warm orange red colors, and the cool blue colors are showing wave troughs. So we have our time on the bottom left corner of this screen, and for the wave amplitude and troughs, they max out at 10 feet in either direction. And here we are showing that the edge of the model is cut off at British Columbia, so this is not a susceptible video for British Columbia use. So here, the magnitude 9 earthquake will be beginning. And immediately you can see that the first wave front in red hits the outer coast in about 15 to 20 minutes. And then that first wave then travels into the Strait of Juan de Fuca and eventually splits into the Salish Sea going to the north and then south into the Puget Sound once it reaches Whidbey Island. If you note on the outer coast, there's still many wave activity occurring, not just the first wave. And as you can look into Puget Sound, the wave passed Seattle at about 2 hours and 20 minutes and then hit Tacoma at 2 hours and 40 minutes. And one of the important things to note about this video is that all coastal waterways within Washington state are affected by this earthquake event. So this video keeps on going for about 20-ish more seconds. So I'll let it play out, but just note how there is still pretty major wave activity going on throughout this map, even 5 hours after the earthquake event. Okay, so now we'll show some of our newest simulation videos that focus on the Southwest Washington coast. Before I begin, I want to point out that these videos show tsunami wave amplitude over water in reference to mean high water, like the last video, and then also tsunami inundation depth over land relative to local elevation, as this figure portrays. So I'll start this video now, and one thing to note here is that immediately when this earthquake happens, Grace Harbor subsides from the earthquake itself. So land and water drop following the earthquake from subsidence, as I previously said, and then the first wave occurs very quickly, and it overtops the outer coast. So here over the water, just to re-emphasize, we are showing wave amplitude, and then we are showing inundation depth over land. Okay, so now I'll show another similar video, but for the Long Beach, Willapa Bay area. So again, land and water drop following the earthquake due to subsidence. And that first wave overtops the Long Beach Peninsula and then into Willapa Bay. I will let this video play out, but again, notice the multiple waves that are occurring along this coastline and inundation depth over land and wave amplitude over water. Okay, so now I'm going to be showing current velocity simulations for the same areas. So we are showing current speed in the unit knots. 1 knot is equal to 1.15 miles per hour. And we have broken it down into 3 or so categories between 0 to 3 knots, 3 to 6 knots, and 9 knots or higher. In our scale, the more purple colors have higher current velocities, and then the paler yellowish colors are slower current velocities. So we're focusing this first simulation on Grays Harbor. And again, the magnitude 9 earthquake begins. And you can see how the currents are changing from the earthquake. And things to note, anything over 3 knots has a risk associated with it, and currents over 9 knots or higher are very devastating to port infrastructure and ships and harbors and things like that. There will be damage and currents in this area for possibly up to 24 hours as well. Okay, now I'll show a similar video for current velocity. but in the Willapa Bay area. So again, our magnitude 9.0 earthquake is occurring. And now here is the current velocity simulation for this study region. Okay, so next I will show some estimated tsunami inundation values and wave arrival times for these selected locations on this map. I will go over data for both the Cascadia subduction zone scenario as well as the Seattle fault scenario where applicable. So here is the corresponding table, and I realize there's a lot of data here. And again, I want to mention that these values are all scenario based, and the next earthquake and tsunami may be bigger or smaller, differing from these values. But things to note here are that the Cascadia subduction zone produced tsunami has its greatest impact on the outer coast, but still causes flooding in the inner waterways from the Canadian border in Bellingham down to Olympia in the southern portion of the Puget Sound. And in Olympia, the first wave arrival is not the biggest, which arrives later at about 10 hours. Additionally, the greatest hazard in the Puget Sound is the Seattle fault here shown in red values. So I'll leave this up for a little bit, but again, there's a lot of data here. It's a lot to take in. The estimated CSZ arrival time on the outer coast is 15 to 20 minutes. It gets around Seattle about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and then down to Olympia at approximately 4 hours and 15 minutes. And then on the other hand, the Seattle fault will affect the Seattle area region within minutes and reach Olympia in about 1 hour, as well as Bellingham area in about an hour and 45 minutes. So there's a lot less warning time for inside the Puget Sound for this Seattle fault scenario. So now we'll go over some of our map products, and this first one is a detailed tsunami inundation map that shows arrival times and inundation depths over land. And this type of map can be very useful for land use planning. And these are all available on our DNR website as well. So this next one is a current velocity map, which can be useful for maritime guidance, which we will hear about later in this presentation series. And current speeds exceeding 3 knots are associated with risk. 3 to 9 knots have minimal to high risk, and currents that are greater than 9 knots have extreme risk to ships. Port infrastructure is unlikely to survive in these currents there. And then finally, this is a tsunami evacuation walk time map, and this shows pedestrian evacuation routes as well as the time it takes to leave the tsunami inundation zone. So our team at the Washington Geological Survey are planning on releasing many products this upcoming year, and I'm excited to tell you about all of these. So in early 2021, we are publishing the CSZ inundation and current velocity for the entire Puget Sound and adjacent waters corresponding to the black outline on this map. And then following this release, we will also publish the same for the Seattle fault inundation and current velocity. Additionally, our colleagues are wrapping up modeling along the northwest outer coast, corresponding to that blue rectangle on the map, and that will be our next publication once we wrap up the Puget Sound and Strait of Georgia regions. And then after that, to wrap things up, we will also be producing 4 new evacuation walk maps, as well as 3 new tsunami simulation videos. I would like to also note that we recently completed a tsunami hazards brochure, and the PDF version is available on our DNR website, and I encourage everyone to check that out as well if you have not already. Another noteworthy item that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that starting this February, Washington is adopting a new building code focused on tsunami loads for newly constructed critical facilities and vertical evacuation structures within the Tsunami Inundation Zone. And our team has good representation on the State Building Code Council, and we are working on incorporating our inundation maps into their tsunami design zones. So keep an eye out for that in early 2021. Also, if you'd like to stay up to date with the latest tsunami research by scientists, emergency responders, and community planners, please subscribe to our Info Alert newsletter by contacting Stephanie Earls, who is the Washington Geological Survey librarian. And finally, you can check out the Geologic Information Portal on the DNR website to get more personal hazard information for a specific location. This portal is interactive with a search bar, and you can toggle on and off different hazards for any address. There is also the capability to save and print different searches for your own use, which can be very useful for planning purposes. And with that, I would like to thank you all, and I will take questions, I think, at the end. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Jacob Whitcraft, Tsunami Program Coordinator for Washington EMD, and I'm here to talk a bit about maritime tsunami hazards. So earlier, we discussed the difference between local and distant tsunamis. So to start, let's talk about how the impacts from a single event can affect different places. In 2011, this Tohoku tsunami was a local event in Japan. 28,000 ships were destroyed, 319 ports were destroyed, and it led to an economic loss of $3.9 billion a day. All the way across the Pacific in California, the same event was a distant source tsunami. While the damage was nowhere near as severe, it still led to $100 million in damages to 24 different harbors. Some harbors closed for a year, and some have yet to fully recover. Here in Washington, we need to be aware of the potential tsunami impacts to the maritime community because of our robust maritime economy. Washington has 31 ports at risk of tsunami damage, including the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, which is the 4th largest container gateway in the United States. We have the largest ferry system in the United States, 7 Coast Guard stations, 4 Navy bases, over 700 fishing and seafood processing operations, and over 400 private marinas. All of this adds up to a $37 billion maritime industry. So let's talk a little bit about the tsunami hazards for harbors and boaters. A tsunami event can cause a number of hazards on the water, including strong and unpredictable currents, sudden water level fluctuations that can cause boats and docks to hit the seafloor during drawdowns. Docks can overtop pilings during surges and can even push boats on top of docks. It can create powerful eddies and whirlpools, like in the picture, and tsunami bores and amplified waves can swamp boats and damage docks. There will be lots of debris in the water, and of course, dangerous conditions can last for 12 to 24 hours after the first wave arrival, which can impact boaters who take their boats offshore and onto deep water. So, what should you do when a local tsunami strikes? If you're on the water, you will need to act as quickly as possible. You should immediately cease any activities and free any bottom attachments like anchors or fishing nets. Then you should head to shore, dock your vessel, and evacuate for high ground if possible. If that's not possible, you should head your vessel to beyond a depth of 100 fathoms. Keep in mind that the recommendation to head for deep water is meant for the open ocean and is probably not applicable for inside the sound. Make sure you maintain awareness of any vessels around you and avoid areas with the potential for dangerous currents. If you're on land, evacuate immediately to high ground. You do not have time to save your vessel and you could die trying. What should you do if a distant tsunami strikes? If you're on the water, you should move to a location with a depth of at least 30 fathoms. You should stay a half mile away from the shoreline and avoid any areas with the potential for strong currents. If a suitable location is not reachable in time, dock your vessel and evacuate to high ground. If you're on land or tied to a dock, leave your vessel and evacuate to high ground. Know your evacuation routes. Many distant source tsunamis are small enough to leave your boat safely docked, and congestion in waterways and at boat ramps can be very dangerous. So, a tsunami happened. What do you do after the event is over? If you're offshore, be sure to check with the U.S. Coast Guard for guidance before attempting to return. And if you're onshore, check with your local authorities for guidance before returning to the inundation zone. Most importantly, do not return to your local port until you have firm guidance from the Coast Guard and local authorities. Local ports and marinas may sustain heavy damage and may not be safe for days, weeks, or months. So what can you personally do to prepare? Be sure to know your tsunami alert levels and have either a marine radio that receives NOAA weather alerts or a NOAA weather radio on your boat, or both. Have enough fuel and supplies on your vessel to remain at sea for at least 3 days, and know the locations of potentially dangerous currents so that you can avoid them and where safe locations in the open water are. What can ports in the maritime community do to prepare? One of the most important things that ports in the maritime community can do to prepare is to develop a maritime-focused response and mitigation strategy. This is a comprehensive document that provides a framework for port and harbor scale decision-making. The focus of this type of strategy is on the maritime infrastructure mitigation and response guidance for boaters and mariners. And what does a maritime mitigation strategy entail? One of the most important things about a strategy like this is doing targeted port area specific tsunami modeling. This detailed modeling can be used to develop a suite of maps that illustrate the inundation extent and depth, current velocities, sea level drawdown, and evacuation routes, and more. Another important part of the strategy like this is defining the specific response roles to ensure appropriate and timely actions are undertaken when necessary. We at EMD are working on developing the first tsunami maritime response and mitigation strategy in the state for the Port of Bellingham, which we hope will act as a template for other at-risk ports in the state to develop similar documents. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Tapero and I'm a Tsunami Program Coordinator with Washington EMD. Now we've talked about why Washington has a tsunami hazard and we've talked about where some of our higher risk areas are. So now we're going to discuss tsunami preparedness and what you can do to make sure that you and your loved ones are prepared in the event of a tsunami. So first, ask yourself and see if you can answer these questions. How will I know a tsunami's coming? Do I know my evacuation routes? And more importantly, have I practiced walking them? Do I have a family emergency plan? Do I have a go bag ready? How will I communicate and reunite with my family after a tsunami? And am I involved in neighborhood and community preparedness? Those are all important questions that if you can't answer them yet, hopefully you'll be able to by the end of the presentation. And if not, hopefully we'll have given you the tools to start answering those questions. So the most important thing to know when it comes to disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis is that you should plan to be on your own for a while, especially if you live in some of the more rural areas of Washington. It could take first responders days or even weeks to get to you. So it's important to know what to do to take care of yourself until they can get there. So what kind of supplies do you need to take care of yourself? So first of all, we want you to have shelter-in-place supplies. So this is the supplies that you will have on hand in your home in case you need to hunker down and wait something out. So a winter storm or some sort of disaster where it's safest for you to stay in your house. This is the kind of supplies where there's so much of it that you're not going to carry it out in a hurry. So this is the stuff that will stay in your house during the disaster. We want you to have at least 2 weeks worth of supplies. That's, again, just in case, because of the disaster, people can't get to you any sooner. So at least 2 weeks worth of non-perishable food and water. And for water, that's 1 gallon of water per person in your family per day for at least 2 weeks. That covers drinking, cooking, and cleaning. And then, of course, 2 weeks worth of anything else everyone in your family might need. So 2 weeks worth of toilet paper, which is definitely something that over the last year, a lot of us have come to understand just how important that is. 2 weeks worth of medications, of anything that the folks in your family, your pets included, will need to get through that 2 weeks. And then the second kind of supplies we want you to have is called a go bag. So go bags are intended to be taken with you if you have to leave somewhere in a hurry. They are intended for immediate evacuation, either to high ground in the event of a tsunami or to a shelter. So if you have to leave the house in a hurry because of a fire or because of an evacuation of some sort, your go bag is what you're going to take with you. You should have one for every member of your family, again, including your pets. And you should have one anywhere that you spend a large amount of time. So at home, at work, at school, in your vehicle, and anywhere else. You know, if you are at church a lot or you spend the weekends with a friend, anywhere that there's a good chance that you're going to be there when a disaster strikes, if you can leave a go bag there, it's good too, just in case. So what is in your go bag? You know, we talk a lot about the usual, like non-perishable food, a flashlight with extra batteries, a first aid kit, warm clothes, which are obviously especially important in Washington. But there are other things that are also really important. So the first being water purification kits or tablets. You know, I talked before about when you have your shelter-in-place supplies, that stuff's too heavy to take in a hurry. You can't carry 2 weeks worth of water for everyone in your family on your back, or at least I can't. So in your go bag, it's a lot easier to have something that can purify water than it is to have 2 gallons of water that you're trying to fit in your bag and then also carry with you. So water purification kits or tablets are great to have. A portable NOAA radio is also really important. That way you can be listening in for updates on the weather or whatever the disaster is, and you can be listening for updates from your local emergency management. It's also super important to have essential medications and medical equipment. So if you're someone who knows that they can't see without their glasses or can't hear without a hearing aid, or you know that you can only go a couple of days without a certain medication or without an inhaler, it's really important to have spares in your go bags. And I know that's hard because we all run into those issues with doctors or with insurance where it's hard sometimes to get spares. But whatever you can do to make sure that you have those with you is very important. Also really important to have copies of any documents that you know that you'll need during or after a disaster. So identification, driver's license, social security card, birth certificate, any of those kind of big identification documents that we use even in our daily life. Beyond that, insurance information, medical information, your doctor's numbers, your medications, anything like that, because you could be away from home for a long time, or you could, for whatever reason, not have access to that information. And this way, you've got it on you. Some great ways to store that, either to scan those documents and then print them physically and put them in your bag, or even better, to put them on a flash drive and then put that flash drive in something waterproof, just in case your bag gets wet, and then put that in your go bag. That way you've got those documents and they're easily accessible Also super important to have cash on hand because depending on the disaster, power might be out. We might not be able to get to an ATM or to the bank. Your phone might not work, so you may not be able to get onto PayPal or Venmo or anything like that. So cash will become very important very quickly in a disaster. And then, of course, the essentials for anyone who's highly vulnerable in your family. So infants, the elderly, your pets, anything that those folks are going to need to be safe. And then comfort items. Comfort items are really important. I know it sounds silly sometimes because we're talking about survival, and survival is all about, just making sure you have food and things like that. But comfort's really important too. And that can be whatever you need it to be. For me, it might be a piece of, chocolate bar or something that can bring me a little joy in the middle of dark time. For you, it might be a stuffed animal or a prayer book or whatever it is that's going to bring you comfort. It's important to have that too. So don't leave that out. It's very important. And also, in your preparedness, think of your feet. After nighttime earthquakes, the #1 injury at emergency rooms is feet cut by broken glass and debris. So the best thing to do is to keep supplies under your bed for just such an occasion. So in a bag or plastic bag, duffel bag, whatever, under your bed, tied to your bed so it doesn't move away during the earthquake. Keep spare pair of shoes, spare flashlight with some batteries, a warm jacket just in case it's Washington and it's raining during the earthquake, and anything else that you might need to respond very quickly. So again, if you're someone who can't see without your glasses, an extra pair might be nice to have in that bag if you can. And you can find a bunch of other really great tips like this in our Prepare in a Year booklet, which you can find at disasterreadywashington.com. But yeah, keep your feet safe. You also can't evacuate from a tsunami if your feet are all cut up. Speaking of evacuations, evacuating will take longer than you think. There's something called the planning fallacy, which is essentially that we always assume that we can finish a task much more quickly than we actually will be able to. And that has been proven just the same with evacuating for a tsunami as with finishing homework or doing chores. So it's really important that you practice evacuating and that you try to cut down on the planning time to make it as quick as possible. So some ways to do that are have your go bag already packed and stored in an easily accessible place. That way you don't have to waste time throwing it together once you've gotten whatever alert you receive to evacuate. And second, don't waste time confirming alerts with secondary sources or social media. Studies have shown that people waste some really valuable minutes, especially if they're in the inundation zone, in confirming what is already an official alert with other sources, or calling family members and saying, hey, did you see this on the news? Or did you get an alert? Or do you hear the sirens? If you feel ground shaking and you're by the coast, that's your warning. If you get a tsunami warning alert, that's your warning. If you hear the sirens, that's your warning. Don't waste time confirming, just head out. So have a plan and practice, practice, practice. You want that to be muscle memory, just the way we practice fire drills, we want to practice evacuating for a tsunami. And for those of you who are or who have kids, there are 2 Washington laws that require earthquake and tsunami evacuation drills. So kids in public schools practice those every year. So that's a great way to take advantage of evacuation drills that are already in place. And a lot of the coastal communities also do some really great events throughout the year as well. Finally, stay informed. So there are some great social media and app resources that you can take part in to make sure that you are always informed with kind of the latest of what's going on tsunami-wise in Washington. So great places to follow are the National Tsunami Warning Center, National Weather Service Seattle or Portland, kind of depending on where you are within the state, and then Washington Emergency Management Division. So following those on Twitter and Facebook honestly really is one of the best ways to stay up to date. That's how I do it, and I'm in emergency management, so that's a great way. And then I also suggest downloading the NVS Tsunami Evacuation app for Washington and Oregon. It's on Apple and Android. This app pushes out notifications from the National Tsunami Warning Center and then has all of the most up-to-date evacuation information on it. So if you're at the coast and you get a warning, you can actually look up your evacuation route right on that app and follow it from there. So it's a really great app, and it's one that's definitely worth checking out. Another great way to stay informed is to have a NOAA weather radio. So NOAA Weather Radio is a nationwide network of radio stations that broadcast continuous weather information directly from the National Weather Service. So this isn't just for tsunami alerts, it's for all kinds of weather, winter storms, high winds, tornadoes, you name it, usually they are broadcasting about it depending on the location. There are 16 stations in Washington, and you do have to program the radio to your area. That way you're only getting alerts that are applicable to you. And they do have a list of the stations at weather.gov/NWR. And what's great is that a lot of the newer alarm features have a feature where they act just like smoke detectors. And basically what that means is that they are constantly scanning for warnings. So in this case, constantly scanning, say, for a tsunami warning. But if there's no warning going on, they're quiet. So you don't hear anything. It's not like it's blasting the radio all the time. But if a warning is sent out by the National Tsunami Warning Center, that radio goes off really loud. So for those of you who are worried about, what do I do if it's the middle of the night? I'm not going to wake up to a Twitter notification. These radios will wake you up. They absolutely will. They will wake you up just like a fire alarm would. So this is a really great way to have some peace of mind. Another great way to stay informed is to sign up for local emergency alerts. So this is another great way to get information that is directly applicable to your location. You can either go to mil.wa.gov/alerts and find your location's emergency alert information. You can also actually, if you have your phone with you right now, you can go ahead and lift it to the screen and scan that code right there, and it'll take you to the website, since this link, obviously you can't click on it. So those are really important. Another great way to stay informed, and also if during an emergency, that way you're getting information for your location from your local emergency management. So we definitely recommend signing up for these if you haven't already. So what if you were alerted when an earthquake occurred before the shaking reached you? Oh. Earthquake early warning is coming. So the earthquake early warning system detects damaging earthquakes and rapidly disseminates alerts to people to warn them of imminent shaking. So it doesn't predict earthquakes, but when an earthquake occurs, it gets warnings out ahead of the shaking. So Washington State's goal is for earthquake early warning alerting to be available to the public starting in 2021 via WIA and mobile phone apps. So definitely look for that coming next year. We're very excited, and that hopefully will give seconds, maybe tens of seconds or even more of warning if we do have a major earthquake in the area. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when that is enough just to give you a chance to get under a piece of furniture or to stop what you're doing and kind of secure your area, that makes such a big difference. So very excited to have that. And one thing I do want to mention before we close, since it wouldn't be a webinar in 2020 without mentioning COVID. So we've been through COVID now for, gosh, it feels like 10 years, but I think it's been about 8 months. And that's an ongoing disaster. It doesn't feel like it always, but it is. So I know we're all feeling a little overwhelmed, thinking about other disasters while we're going through one. So here's just a little advice for re-preparing for disasters during the COVID-19 pandemic, in which we are using some of the things we have prepared. So if since March you have had to use any of your emergency supplies, maybe dip into that food for a little bit because you didn't want to go grocery shopping, now would be a good time to review what you have and possibly restock. Make sure that you've got some good food in there that you actually want to eat, and that you have at least 2 weeks worth of it. If you've had to dip into your emergency savings fund, like a lot of us have had to do, you may start thinking about ways to replenish it. I know that that's tough to think about, but there are resources online, and we are happy to point you to them to start thinking about restocking that as well. If you've had any change in your financial, medical, or insurance information, now is a very good time to update your important documents and then save updated versions of those and put them in your emergency bags. So get back to scanning or digitally saving them and make sure that those are getting into your emergency bags, maybe also saving them to the cloud so that you can access them other places, and then also making sure that your emergency contacts have copies of those as well. And if since March you've had to spend long amounts of time in a new location for whatever reason, you're living somewhere new, or you find yourself having to be somewhere else that you weren't having to be before, consider making a new go bag to store there. It might feel temporary, but even if it's a place that you know you're only going to be for a few months, we never know when disaster strikes. So just give those suggestions some thought and see what you need to kind of restock on. And if you need help with that, again, you can check out our YouTube page, and this little scan icon right here will work if you hold up your phone. We did some re-prepare webinars earlier in the year, so those are accessible. You can watch those, and they have a lot of great suggestions.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to our presentations today. Remember, you can survive if you get prepared. So these are some QR codes that we have here that send you to these key links with lots of great information if you want to check these out and go into even more detail on what we've talked about today. Also, if you have additional questions, please, after this this presentation is all over, please reach out to public.education@mil.wa.gov. And now I'm going to go in and answer these wonderful questions. There are a ton of questions that y'all have asked during this presentation, so I'm going to do my best to get through these as quickly as possible. There's a bunch of them. All right, so let me start here with the first one. All right, I live on a bluff on Whidbey Island. They had a drill with a tsunami alarm. We heard nothing. If not associated with an earthquake or at night, for example, how does one get a warning? Also, what constitutes high ground? All right, high ground is anything outside of the inundation zone, so please check your maps on Washington Geological Survey DNR website, Geology Portal. We have the link up there. And then the tsunami sirens have a small radius, about a 1 mile radius in which they're audible. This is during perfect conditions, of course. The sirens are really intended as a warning for people who might be directly on or near the beach or without access to other forms of alerts. For those outside of their range, your best bet is to sign up for alerts. We have a number of options and to purchase a NOAA weather radio. And make sure the ones that you purchase, as Alyssa mentioned earlier, are the ones that are programmable for your area. Some models of these can be programmed, like I said, and this is really one of the best ways because it will wake you up in the middle of the night. Next question, won't a 9.0 earthquake destroy everything? Well, it will certainly be catastrophic and cause a lot of damage, especially along the coast and the nearer you are to the subduction zone. Due to modern building codes that we have and investment in strengthening certain bridges and roads, key bridges and roads that we have, especially north-south, some buildings and infrastructure will only receive slight to moderate damage, especially the buildings and infrastructure that were built after 1980. Also, well-built wooden houses, wooden structures, and the more modern they are, that are bolted to the foundation will tend to survive with limited damage, such as possibly broken windows, broken chimneys. Also, make sure to strap your water heaters and make sure that you've got your bookshelves and heavy items that are secured, so you don't have those falling on you during the middle of shaking. So make sure you secure those. But those are the wooden houses, wooden structures that are bolted to the foundation are the most likely to survive. Also, there's significant risk due to fires because water pipelines are going to be broken. There's going to be essentially because of limited access for first responders due to landslides and downed trees and power lines, liquefaction, and damaged roads. Folks are not going to be able to get out and fight fires right away. So there's a risk from that. There's a risk from aftershocks, lots of aftershocks. Also, of course, the tsunami waves. And so there's secondary hazards. There's a bunch of those that can also cause a lot of damage or will cause a lot of damage. All right, so next question. What constitutes as high ground? I live on Whidbey Island in the Crescent Harbor area and haven't been able to find any data on what areas to head to or if the entire island would expect inundation. Okay, so high ground will vary depending on where you are, the source and size of the tsunami generated. The Washington Geological Survey has an online map. If you go to click on the QR code here for the Geology Portal, the top right link that we have there, and then go to their tsunami evacuation materials where you can check the hazard for your area. Please note that these maps will be updated in the future to cover more areas than is presently represented. So these take a lot of time and they are expensive. Sorry, my light went out here. They are expensive to develop and we only have a little bit of funding every year. So please bear with us. We are doing our best to create as many of these as possible per year. But eventually we will have a complete pedestrian evacuation maps for all the key areas that are at risk for Washington coastline. Is there a map that shows what areas are susceptible to tsunamis? So again, Washington Geological Survey, go to the Geology Portal. You can check out the hazard for your areas. There's tons of great information on there. They do an excellent job. And again, they're always adding to it, always doing updates. So please check back often. All right, so I want to know what basin sloshing is and what it means to the various types of tsunamis that can occur in the Salish Sea. So earthquakes and landslides can cause tsunamis that travel all throughout the Puget Sound and Salish Sea. As these are narrow passages for large amounts of water, to travel through the tsunami wave action is complicated and can take many hours to travel from the point of origin to various locations throughout the sound. Because of the complicated geometry of the sound, waves refract and reflect, and often the first wave to reach an area is not the largest. This is kind of like a sloshing effect, although it is not the technical term we use. The waves that travel from displacement of the seafloor from an earthquake or landslide are still called tsunami waves. Now, there are seiches that happen in lakes, inner coast or inner bodyways or inner bodies of water. So there are seiches and that you get that kind of sloshing back and forth effect that you can have that. So for instance, Lake Washington or Lake Crescent. All right, so are there tsunami alarms on inland coastal areas in risk zones? Is there a site to see where alarms are located? So I'm assuming this is Tsunami Sirens. All right, so both the outer and inner coast have sirens. You can find a map of all hazard alert broadcast tsunami siren locations on the Emergency Management Division website, and that's mil.wa.gov/tsunami. We don't have that one up, but if you go to our mil.wa.gov website and you look for tsunami, it will have it up there. However, this map does not show the sirens we've installed in 2020. We've installed 21 so far this year, and so we're still updating that map. We had 76. Again, we installed 21 more, and we will be installing another 20 plus over the next 6 to 8 months to complete that map, so that we complete filling all the gaps, for alarms and tsunami sirens that we need along the coastal areas, so we can alert everyone. Also, you can again reach out to public.education@mil.wa.gov if you have more specific questions for any of these things, especially the sirens. All right. So the next question, how do you find out the extent of the inundation zone at any particular location? Again, please go to the Washington Geological Survey, the Geology Portal there on that link at the top right. Tons of great information. All right, next question. Has there ever been a recorded tsunami in the Seattle area? The 1964 Alaska earthquake produced a 30-centimeter wave at the port of Seattle. And let me do some quick math here. I believe that's about a foot high, something like that. So that is the only historic tsunami to affect the Seattle area. And the geologic record that, in the geologic records, as far as, we go out and dig and look for tsunami deposits along the coastal areas, recorded in nearby marshy areas. So essentially, we've got quite a large historical record, but the most significant tsunami that we know of was from the 900 AD Seattle Fault earthquake event. So that was, again, the last major earthquake from that fault system. Doesn't happen very often, but we had, if you want to take, for example, if you look at West Seattle for Alki Beach, so that whole area down there where all those condos are and that whole beach area and restaurants and stuff, that was all underwater. So that lifted up like 25 feet, boop, like within a few seconds. And so there's quite a bit of displacement, and of course, obviously that causes tsunami. All right, so next question. Will an intercoast warning system eventually come into fruition? So the National Tsunami Warning Center is working on building capability to conduct tsunami forecasting and alerting for the intercoast. They have not provided a timeline for when this will be completed, but I know they are working on that and developing models to be able to do that. I think starting out with Bellingham and Tacoma. In the interim, we here at Washington State Emergency Management Division, we do have a process in place where as soon as we get alerted from the National Tsunami Warning Center that there is a warning, tsunami warning for the intercoast, then we will initiate a wireless emergency alert tsunami warning that will go out to cell phones in the intercoast area. We will also, of course, set off the tsunami sirens, the ones that are located in the intercoast as well. So we do have some alerting capability, but obviously there's a lot of improvement that needs to be made, and they are working on that. All right, will there be more tsunami and inundation modeling videos produced for inland waterways like around Hood Canal and Bainbridge Island? Yes, the Washington Geological Survey will be working on producing more videos like this for the inland waterway in the coming years. And again, I know we all want things instantaneously. Trust me, we do too, but it takes time. And also we want to make sure we have quality products, they're well vetted, so we will continue to plug away at that. All right, next question here. The tsunami model simulations assume one earthquake event without aftershocks, correct? Yes, correct. It is time consuming to create and run tsunami models. They're very complex. The more factors and variables that you incorporate, the more difficult it is to develop them, and the more room for errors that you can inject within the model itself. There is always a possibility of localized tsunamis, even days after the main earthquake, due to landslides and also due to large aftershocks. We just can't predict those accurately. Okay, so next question. How far upstream on the Chehalis River is the inundation likely to occur? We do not yet have tsunami models developed for the upriver areas. We cannot say exactly how far upriver the wave will go. However, based on the height of the wave as it enters the river channel, we would tentatively expect the inundation to reach as far as Montesano, but be largely confined to the river channel and existing floodplain. Next question here. I want to live at the coast, but I am afraid. I feel like the earthquake will make it hard to run before the tsunami hits and roads will be packed, making it impossible to get anywhere. And I recently heard the earthquake will do damage 500 miles away. Is that true? Well, disasters such as the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and tsunami are definitely scary. They should be scary because they are extremely dangerous, depending on where you are, and they can do a lot of damage. But that's why we're having these webinars. That's why we were spending this time to reach out to you folks, and you are taking your time to get educated and figure out how to protect yourself so that you can survive. Because there's overwhelming evidence from past disasters that you can survive if you get prepared. And that's why we have that slogan up there, because we know it works. Now, if you have a go bag ready, if you know your evacuation routes, on the places that you normally are along the coast, either where you work or you live or you recreate, if you're signed up for the alerts, please sign up for multiple alerts in different ways. If you have a really good chance of surviving, and make sure that your loved ones as well, you're getting them informed, getting them ready as well. And when we're all prepared, then we have an even better chance of surviving. And as far as like roads, that's why we tell people, please don't expect to be able to drive. Evacuate on foot if you can. Use whatever, as far as, if you need to use a bicycle or ATV or whatever you need, you think is going to work. By foot is the best. To be able to get to high ground as quickly as possible. Obviously avoid running into people. What we're finding is that, yes, there will be shaking all the way out to Spokane, but it will be minimal. The further east you go across the Cascades, the less intense the shaking is, so less likely there is for damage. But don't be too afraid. Just make sure you take that fear to inspire you, like you have participating here or watching these presentations, to take action, do one step at a time, and help you and your loved ones get prepared so you can survive. All right, so how much will tsunamis affect Seattle, West Seattle waterfront areas? In the Seattle waterfront areas, a tsunami from the Seattle Fault poses the greatest hazard. In this scenario, the tsunami wave will arrive within less than 5 minutes to the downtown waterfront area, giving very little time for warning. Again, the shaking is your warning, right? Inundation depth over land may be upwards of up to 10 feet in some areas along the shoreline or higher. Additionally, a tsunami from a large Cascadia earthquake will also affect the Seattle waterfront areas, but you will have more time. You'll have it. The first wave is likely to arrive within about 2 hours and 20 minutes or so, and the estimated depth is maybe 2 to 4 feet or so, and then it's less depending on the exact location or less. So for Seattle event, about 5 minutes warning, maybe, to get to high ground. For Cascadia subduction zone event, Seattle area, a little over 2 hours. All right, does the Willapa land area also drop after the subduction zone? Yes, it does. The earthquake will cause land drop subsidence over the entire coastal areas of Washington. The severity of the subsidence will vary depending on the size of the next earthquake, such as magnitude 8.5, 9.0, whatever. That will dictate or have dictate basically how much subsidence there is, and also where along the subduction the earthquake is. Largely centered, like where it starts to rupture. And in the models that we are using, the outer coast subsides roughly around 6 feet due to the earthquake. Okay, is there a map of siren locations? So I think we answered this before, but yeah, if you go to mil.wa.gov/tsunami, or you reach out to public.education@mil.wa.gov, we'll be able to provide you locations of where these sirens are. And again, we're still installing them, so we will have updated maps and everything sometime later next year when it's all done. All right, what is the email address for signing up for SU Alerts? So reach out to Stephanie Earls at WGS. It's stephanie.earls@dnr.wa.gov. tsunami.gov. What do we do if we're on the water during a tsunami? Okay, good question, like all of these. Head to water that is as deep as possible. Stay away from other vessels and debris so you don't crash into them or have the tsunami crash you into them. And turn your vessel so that you're facing the oncoming wave. Now remember, so there's a wave coming in, right, from the sea, right? So you face into it. Now there will also, that wave will be coming, after it hits land, it will then be coming back out to the sea. So you got to turn around and face the other way to face that wave. And then another wave will be coming in and you got to turn around and face that wave. And so that was successful for some vessels and captains during the Tohoku tsunami in 2011. So there were 28,000 ships that were destroyed, but there were a number of them that knew what to do, and they did that over and over and over and over again until there were no more damaging waves. And so that's one way to do it. Also, ideally, if you can get to land, before the tsunami wave arrives, then get to land, get off your vessel, get to high ground, get to safety. That's your best bet. Okay, next question. With all the federal weather scientific resources, why can't more priority be placed on the issues Washington faces? Yes, right, exactly. Why don't we get higher priority? Well, yeah. So we, Washington MD, Washington Geological Survey, and really, the tsunami team here in Washington State, which, local emergency managers, tribal emergency managers, a whole host of folks. We work very closely with our federal partners to advocate for Washington anytime we can when it comes to our, sorry about that, turned off again, when it comes to our earthquake and tsunami hazards. For example, funding. All of the funding for all the things that we've shown you as far as products, what we're doing, it comes from the National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program. Well, actually through the tsunami grant through the Department of Commerce. And so it's a federal grant that we get all of our funding from. We're dependent on every year. And we have to apply for this every year. We have to fight for it every year. And so it's extremely important. We're doing our best we can with limited fundings. We definitely combine our efforts on the state and federal level as much as we can to advocate, but we have no control over how federal agencies prioritize their funding or scientific efforts, but we certainly advocate as best we can. Okay, next question. Okay, the tsunami isn't of much concern to me as I live in Vancouver. Can you tell me where to go to find out about faults and earthquakes? I know the coastal quake will do damage to for miles. Assuming you're in Vancouver, Washington, you can again go to the DNR Geology Portal and you can find all of the faults that we know about in Washington State. Tons of great information on there. All right, I live in Puyallup. I see a tsunami can reach the port of Tacoma. The Puyallup River empties at the port. How likely is it that the wave will push upriver? The wave will push upriver some distance. Again, we don't have any modeling for that yet. Also, however, because of the significant engineering that has gone into the flood control system of dikes along the waterway, we don't not anticipate the wave will flood any upriver locations. Okay, so, all right. Are there predictions for a tsunami in the Straits of Juan de Fuca? We cannot predict when tsunamis will happen, just like we cannot predict earthquakes. What we are working on is developing best estimates of potential inundation based on historic events. In 2018, the Washington Geological Survey published maximum inundation and current velocity maps using the Cascadia L1 scenario. That L1 scenario, again, is the 2,500-year recurrence interval scenario, and that's what it's essentially the maximum considered event that we model to. There's only been one tsunami event that we think was higher than that within the last 10,000 years, and we are been doing Washington Geological Survey published the inundation and current velocity maps for Port Townsend, Port Angeles, within the Strait of Juan de Fuca. This publication, along with others, again, are available on the Geology Portal, their website. The state is also planning on modeling the rest of the Strait of Juan de Fuca in 2021, so expect more to come. Is there a tutorial for the tsunami map? It is quite complicated for the average user. Okay, sorry. There is not one available at this time. If you have questions about the portal or having trouble finding data, you can email susan.schnur@dnr.wa.gov. You can also reach out to the public.education@mil.wa.gov. We'll connect you. That is a great suggestion and something we will have to consider for the future. We do not currently have any data available for Olympia. However, we are finishing up our analysis for a magnitude 9 subduction zone event for all of Puget Sound, and those results should be out in the next few months. So be sure to check back soon. Okay, is there a recommended NOAA radio? As state agencies, we actually cannot recommend any brands or models. We get in trouble for that. But we have in the past handed out Recom R-1630 radios at our events. Those are the ones that we have programmed here as well. Again, we cannot formally recommend any brands. It just happens to be one that we use. You can also look on your preferred online retailer for those with the best reviews, such as Amazon. All right, is there an inundation map for the east side of Fidalgo Island and La Conner? A map of the Cascadia 9.0 magnitude L1 scenario is being prepared for this area in the coming months. We will announce the release of this product through the DNR Washington Geological Survey blog at washingtonstategeology.wordpress.com. Okay, any advice for water storage for home? I bought large blue water holders, but I'm not sure how to fill them with water that will stay fresh. Or should I just buy water bottles? Thank you. Okay, we recommend changing your stored water every 6 months or a year, unless the sealed container has an expiration date that says otherwise. You can also purchase water purification tablets or filters, which make it easy to ensure any water you have or come across will be drinkable. I mean, we've got some videos on how to store water. What are some good recommendations? A few things I will say also on this is, make sure that the containers that you store them in are clean. You can use a little bit of bleach to clean them out if you need to, but essentially they need to be opaque so you can't see through them. Don't have them exposed to sunlight. Obviously change them out regularly. And then, one thing you can do is just buy cases of bottled water and just recycle those out all the time. That tends to work as well. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to store. I would put them in different places too, again, out of sunlight, and make sure that you have access to that water and just, keep cycling them out. All right, how long would a notification via WIA would take to receive? Oh, I'm sorry. How long would a notification via WIA take to receive? And once the duty officer at DEM receives the tsunami warning? It's hard to estimate since it would depend on how quickly the signal would reach your cell phone, but it would only take the duty officer seconds to minutes to send out. So you would receive it very quickly in an optimal situation. If your phone is roaming or has bad signal or it's off, obviously you're either not going to receive it or there will be a lag. Now, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, you only receive one WIA message, right? So, and there's a couple different things here. One, if you happen to be in the area that the WIA is alerting for, say, along the coast, right, then you will receive one message. Now, if you happen to be outside of the area and then you go into the tsunami inundation zone area, then you will also receive an alert once you go into the zone. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'm still unclear on how to receive alerts via cell phone, Ocean Shores. Okay, so go to we have the QR code on the top left there to mil.wa.gov/alerts to sign up for alerts in your local area. This site also has instructions for how to sign up for tsunami alerts. If you use Twitter or Facebook, you can also follow the National Tsunami Warning Center on either of these platforms to get alerts there. Lastly, check out the NVS Tsunami Evacuation Map or app. Once downloaded, this will also push tsunami alerts to your phone if you allow it to in the settings. If you still have questions or run into issues, please reach out to us again at public.education@mil.wa.gov. Okay, well, there's lots of questions. Okay, I have mobility issues, but I do not have a disability tag for my car. In case of evacuation, I would have to drive. What driving tips do you recommend so I don't impede first responders and emergency management? Oh, okay. If you need to drive, then please drive. I mean, hopefully the road will be clear, so just keep an eye out for anyone on the road. Drive cautiously. Be sure to pull over for anyone with their lights flashing. However, in the event for a local earthquake, the roads, they're going to be blocked. I mean, landslides, liquefaction, down telephone poles. There may be some sections where they're clear enough to drive, but I would not count on it. Other possible, so there's a lot of things could be blocking the road. Other folks crashing or traffic jams. So make sure you have a plan B if you can. Talk to your family and your friends, neighbors. You got to figure out a way. Got to help each other out. And yeah, I mean, there's just no way around it. All right. Do the Lahar sirens double as tsunami sirens in areas with waterways? They do not. So the all hazard alert broadcast tsunami sirens can be used for other purposes in an emergency by local emergency managers. The Lahar sirens are not the same, and they can't be used in the same manner. So they're two separate systems, right? So these AHAB tsunami sirens and the Lahar sirens are two separate systems, so don't expect tsunami sirens or tsunami warnings or alerts or anything to come out of the Lahar sirens. I have asked the electric utility on Whidbey Island PSE to assure me that the many power lines crisscrossing my tsunami evacuation route will withstand the worst earthquake. The response lacked credibility. Is there anything in your planning being done to address my concern? Washington EMD and DNR, unfortunately, we have no authority and influence over local utilities. They're their own entities. So we plan, as others should, that evacuation routes may be blocked, such with down power lines. So definitely avoid those. This is one reason why we urge people to evacuate by foot, so you can travel off-road, get around these. If necessary, until there's a better statewide solution for things like utility lines, they unfortunately remain a secondary hazard for a lot of our disasters. And also, this is why it's really important to have flashlights or multiple flashlights, and I recommend headlamps in your go bags, because these events oftentimes happen at night. And if it's a local event and the shaking is 5 or 6 minutes and there's a lot of damage, then expect the power to be out and no lights to be on. So it will be dark if it's the middle of the night. So make sure you've got lights so you can see where to go, and practice your routes, because it'll be a lot more difficult and dangerous and slower during the night to get to high ground. Additional question here. Okay. Turn directly, particularly in the wave. It really depends on the exact situation, but many boaters in the Tohoku tsunami survive with their boats intact by facing into the wave. If there is, but yeah, I guess it really depends on the conditions. I mean, do the best you can out there. It's gonna be dangerous. So use your best judgment. For your vessel, your skills, in your situation, just use your best judgment. If there's a big local quake, what is the likelihood of both a tsunami and a lahar hitting some area? Although not a big local quake, this did happen when Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980 in Spirit Lake. It could also be a good action movie starring The Rock. Okay. We have a team answering these questions, by the way. Okay, otherwise, the chances of an earthquake setting off a volcanic eruption is pretty small, but keep an eye out on our social media, because what to expect when you're expecting a volcano might be coming to a theater near you soon. So, we don't know of any situations where a large earthquake triggered a volcanic eruption and therefore a lahar, or mudslide. So it's very, very unlikely. But that is all the questions that I see. So I think we got through all these. Well, I really appreciate your participation. I don't want to take too much of your time here, but I thank you so much for watching. Again, please do not hesitate to go to these links, to reach out to us if you have any questions. Also, please share this information with your friends and loved ones and neighbors and community members. Also, look for this recording and these slides on our website. We will broadcast these out so that they're available. So thank you, and remember, you can survive if you get prepared. And please, please, please make sure that you protect yourself in this tough pandemic time, COVID-19. Please social distance. Thank you so much. Take care.